There's a kind of wound that doesn't bleed. You can't point to it on your body. You can't bandage it, can't stitch it shut, can't show the scar to anyone who asks. But it's there, in the way you flinch when someone says your name too kindly, in the way you hold yourself a little apart from warmth, like you're afraid it might burn you. Most people never talk about that wound. They carry it through their whole lives, through marriages, through children, through decades of waking up and going to sleep, and they never once say out loud, "I don't believe I deserve to be loved." This is a story about a woman who carried that wound so long it became part of how she walked. Her name was Naya, she was Apache, she was 26 years old. And the day she rode into a broken-down cattle ranch on the eastern edge of New Mexico, she was running from something she couldn't name and toward something she didn't yet believe existed. The man who found her, or who she found, depending on who you ask, was 6 feet 5 inches of sun-scorched, soft-spoken cowboy who kept a journal in the saddlebag of a horse named Gospel. His name was Elias Cord, and he had wounds of his own. What happened between them wasn't a love story in the way love stories are usually told. It was slower than that, more painful, more honest. It was two broken people standing in the same dust, trying to figure out whether being seen was something they could survive. If you've ever held yourself back from something good because you didn't think you deserved it, read on. This one is for you. I keep a journal. I've kept one since I was 19 years old, and a Mescalero Apache elder named Hosteen Runningwaiter told me that a man who doesn't write down what he sees forgets what he was made of. I didn't fully understand that then. I understand it better now, sitting at a kitchen table that smells like pine oil and old coffee, listening to the wind move across the canyon like it's looking for something it left behind. My name is Elias Cord. I am 41 years old. I run a cattle ranch on a wedge of land between two mesas in eastern New Mexico that my father left me and his father left him, a place called Cordubin Flat on no map I've ever seen, but every old-timer in the county knows it by name. I have 37 head of cattle, 2 horses, a dog named Biscuit who is mostly asleep, and approximately 600 acres of the most beautiful, inhospitable land in the American Southwest. I am not a man who talks about feelings. I want to be honest about that from the start. I say what needs saying, I fix what's broken. I write in this journal at night because writing is the only place I can say things I don't know how to say out loud, which means it has become, over the years, a very long and very private record of the things I should have said and didn't. I tell you all of this because what happened in the autumn of my 41st year is the kind of thing that requires context. It requires you to understand what I was before she came, so that you can understand what changed, and why, and how slow and difficult and necessary that change actually was. She arrived on the morning of September 3rd, which I know precisely because I wrote it in the journal that night in letters bigger than I usually write, like the date itself was trying to hold on to something. I was repairing a section of fence along the east pasture when I heard hooves on the hard dirt of the main trail, a single horse, moving at a walk that sounded tired, the cadence slightly uneven like the animal was picking its way carefully rather than being guided. I stood up from the fence post. Biscuit, who had been sleeping in the shade of a juniper, raised his head, considered the situation, and put his head back down. She came around the bend in the trail at the same moment. The sun broke through the low cloud cover that had been sitting over the mesas all morning, and I will tell you honestly that I thought I had imagined her. She was small, compact in the way that people who have spent their lives moving are compact. Everything essential, nothing wasted. Dark hair pulled back with a leather cord, a coat that was one size too large, brown canvas, worn at the cuffs. She was sitting a paint horse that I recognized immediately as one of the Hickorea horses from the stock trader over in Cimarron, which meant she had come from at least 50 miles east, maybe more. Her face, I wrote about her face that night for half a page and then crossed most of it out because I couldn't get it right. She had the particular kind of face that is only possible in a person who has been watching things for a very long time. Watchful, precise, but underneath that watchfulness something else, something that was trying very hard not to show. I raised my hand in greeting, the way you do out here, palm out, not waving, just acknowledging. She stopped the paint horse about 20 yards from me and looked at me for a long moment without speaking. "This Cordubin Flat," she said. "It is," I said. She nodded once, like I had confirmed something she was hoping to be wrong about. "I need water for my horse," she said. And work if you have it. I can fence, I can herd, I can shoe. I don't need much. I looked at her. I looked at the horse, which had its head down and its flanks showing the faint sweat salt of a long ride. I looked at the sky, which was white and heavy and promising a cold night. I have water, I said. I have work, come on. She didn't thank me. She just turned the horse and followed me toward the barn, and I walked ahead of her thinking about what her eyes had looked like in that first moment, like she'd been hoping I would say no. Her name was Nea Runshield. She told me this the way she told me everything in those first days, in pieces without elaboration, placed on the table between us and left there for me to do with what I would. She had come from a community about 60 miles northeast, a place I knew vaguely, a small cluster of families on land that had been parceled out and parceled away, and reparceled so many times over the last century that nobody was quite sure who owned what anymore, which is a story familiar to most Apache families I've ever met. She had been there, and then she hadn't been. She told me nothing more than that, and I didn't ask. She slept the first night in the bunkhouse, which had been empty for 2 years since my last hand. A Navajo kid named Danny Tso had left to go to school in Albuquerque. She brought her own bedroll. She didn't eat dinner with me. In the morning, she was already at the east fence by the time I got out to the pasture, and she had fixed in 3 hours what I had been fussing with for 2 days. I watched her work. I couldn't help it. She moved through physical labor the way some people move through prayer, with a kind of focused quiet that had nothing performative about it, nothing showing off. When she drove a post into the ground, she did it with the entire weight of her body, and when she stretched wire, she tested it with both hands and her right cheek, pressing her face against it lightly to feel the tension, which I had never seen anyone do before and which worked better than any instrument I'd tried. At noon, she sat in the shade of a cedar and ate something from a cloth sack, dried meat, I thought, and something else I couldn't identify, and she ate alone, facing the mesa, and I sat 40 feet away and ate my lunch and did not try to close the distance. This went on for 4 days. On the 5th day, she came and found me at the water trough and said, without preamble, "The lower pasture fence has wolf damage on the south side." "I know," I said. "You want me to get to it or the north run first?" "North run, but thank you for looking." She turned to go, then she stopped. "You got a dog named Biscuit," she said. "I do. That's a terrible name for a dog." I looked at Biscuit, who was asleep against the water trough with one paw twitching. "He didn't seem to mind," I said. And something happened to her face, not quite a smile, but the movement that happens just before a smile when a person has forgotten, for a second, that they weren't going to do that. It was there and then it was gone, and she was walking back toward the south pasture, and I stood at the water trough for longer than necessary, looking at the space where she had been. I wrote in the journal that night, "She's Apache, Jicarilla stock maybe or Mescalero, I can't be sure. She's running from something. She works like someone who has never been allowed to stop. I don't know what happened to her. I know I shouldn't ask." Then I wrote, "She made almost a smile today at Biscuit's name. I think it was the first time her face did anything that wasn't armor." I stared at that sentence for a while, then I wrote underneath it, "I understand armor." The week that followed was the driest week of the season, which in New Mexico means the kind of heat that sits inside your chest and stays there. We worked the fences and checked the water lines and sorted the cattle for the fall cut. And somewhere in those 7 days of shared labor, a thing happened that I have since tried to describe in the journal and found inadequate every time. We became used to each other. Not comfortable, comfort would come later, slower, and at a cost, but used to each other. The specific way of two people who have both spent a long time alone learning to be quiet in the same space without it being uncomfortable. She knew where I kept the wire cutters. I knew she took her coffee black and didn't want it until she'd been working for at least 2 hours. She knew Gospel's left rear shoe was loose, and she fixed it without being asked. I knew she went to the east fence line at sunset sometimes and stood there for a while facing the distance, and I didn't go to that fence line at sunset. On the 10th day, Biscuit followed her to the bunkhouse instead of coming inside with me. I let him. What I didn't know then, what I was only beginning to understand, the way you understand a storm by the way the light changes before it arrives, was that Nea Runshield was not simply running from a place. She was running from a belief she had spent 26 years constructing, a belief so thoroughly built into the architecture of how she moved through the world that she could not feel it as a belief anymore. She felt it as fact. The fact was this: she was not someone who was meant to be loved. She did not say this to me. She would not say it for weeks. I came to understand it the way you come to understand most important things, not through what someone says, but through what they flinch at, what they look away from, what they go very still in the presence of. I came to understand it the night of the storm. It came fast, the way late-season storms do out here, sky clear at 7, dark by 8. By 9, a wall of cloud from the northwest driving rain sideways and lightning forking down into the mesa on the far side of the canyon. I had the cattle in the lower pasture, and the roof of the supply shed had been needing repair for 3 weeks, and I ran out into it without thinking. I was on the supply shed roof, trying to nail down the loose tarpaulin over the feed store when I heard her below me. "Give me the other side," she shouted up through the rain. I hadn't asked her. I hadn't even thought of her. She had come on her own in the storm, in the dark, and she had a rope in her hand and was already looping it up toward me, and we worked the tarp down in 4 minutes flat where it would have taken me 20 and probably blown off twice. We came down from the roof and stood in the doorway of the supply shed, while the rain came down in gray curtains, and the lightning made the whole canyon bright and white every 30 seconds or so. She was soaked through. Her hair had come loose from the cord. She was breathing hard from the effort and the cold, and she was holding her left hand in her right, and I looked and saw that she'd cut it on a nail head, not deep but bleeding across the base of her thumb. "Come inside," I said. She hesitated. That hesitation, I felt it more than I saw it. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, and in those 2 seconds I understood that the inside of a house was not something she stepped into easily, and that the invitation itself meant something I couldn't quite read. "Just for the cut," I said. "I have better supplies inside." She came. I sat her at the kitchen table, and I cleaned the cut and put a strip of cloth around it. I don't stock proper bandages. I should, I know, and she sat very still while I did this, looking at the grain of the table. Her hands were smaller than I expected. Her nails were cut short, and there was a scar on the back of her right wrist that was old and faded, and none of my business. "Thank you," I said, "for the roof." "Didn't want the feed to spoil," she said. "Still..." She looked up at me then, and I saw something in her face that I had not seen there before. It was discomfort, but not the discomfort of pain or cold. It was the discomfort of being looked at directly. Like my saying thank you had been a kind of light she didn't know how to stand in. "I'm going to make coffee," I said. "You don't have to stay, but you can." She stayed. We sat at that table for 2 hours while the storm worked itself out. We talked about small things at first: the cattle, the fence, the weather pattern. She told me about a storm she'd ridden through once coming down from the Sanger to Cristo Mountains. A whiteout in April, no visibility. Just the horse beneath her making decisions she trusted more than her own. I told her about the winter my father and I were snowed into the ranch for 11 days, and we ran out of conversation on the 4th day and spent the remaining 7 playing cards in complete silence, perfectly content. She laughed at that, a real laugh, short and sudden and surprised by itself, and her hand went up to her mouth immediately afterward, like she was catching it before it could escape further. I watched that gesture. I tucked it away in the part of my mind where I keep things that matter. "You must get lonely," she said. It wasn't a question exactly. More like a thought she said out loud before she could stop it. "Sometimes," I said, "you." She looked at the table again. Her finger traced a knot in the wood grain, slow and precise. "I got good at not noticing," she said. I nodded. I understood that. I understood it in the specific way of someone who has also gotten very good at not noticing, which is a skill that looks like toughness from the outside and feels like something else entirely from the inside. "That's different from not being lonely," I said. She didn't respond to that, but she wrapped her right hand around her coffee cup and held it there for a long time, both hands around the warmth, and she didn't leave. Later, much later, she would tell me about the man she had left behind. Not a husband. They had never made it to that, but a relationship long enough and close enough and complicated enough to have left marks. He had not been cruel in the ways that are obvious. He had been cruel in the ways that are subtle, the ways that take years to recognize because they arrive wearing the clothes of criticism, of correction, of concerned observation. You're too sensitive. You take everything too hard. You make everything so difficult. Why can't you just be normal? I don't know why I bother. Not all at once. One small piece at a time, the way a wall is built. And you don't notice the wall until you're standing on the wrong side of it, looking at a version of yourself that has shrunk to fit inside a very small space. She didn't tell me this that night. She didn't tell me for weeks. But sitting at that table while the storm moved east and the lightning thinned to distant flickers, I could feel the shape of something unspoken between us. Not between us specifically, between her and the world. A distance she maintained at the exact circumference of safety, and no closer. I didn't push. I just kept making coffee. I kept it warm and I kept it black and I kept the lamp lit between us. And eventually the storm stopped, and she stood up to go, and at the door she paused with her hand on the frame. "Ilias," she said, first time she'd used my name. "Yeah," I said. She looked at the dark outside for a moment. "Thank you," she said, for not making it strange." And then she was gone into the dark, walking back to the bunkhouse, and I stood at the door and watched her go, and I wrote in the journal that night. She thanked me for not making it strange. What she meant was, she thanked me for not requiring her to be more than she was tonight in the cold, with a cut on her hand and a storm outside, and both of us a little too known to each other for comfort. I understand that, too. I understand almost everything about her except how someone looked at her and decided she wasn't worth cherishing. That part I can't follow. That part I keep coming back to. I didn't say any of this. She wouldn't have been able to hear it yet, but I wrote it here where I write the things I can't yet say. It's September 3rd, and everything on this ranch is the same as it was, and something is different. There is a particular kind of October in eastern New Mexico that I have tried to describe to people from other places and always failed. It isn't the color, though the color is remarkable, the cottonwoods going gold and the chamisa burning yellow along the creek beds. It isn't the temperature, which swings 40 degrees between noon and midnight and requires you to carry 3 different layers wherever you go. It's something in the quality of the light itself, like the sun is paying closer attention, like everything is slightly more itself than usual. She noticed it too. I know because on the 4th day of October she stopped in the middle of oiling a saddle, looked at the mesa, and said very quietly, "It's doing that thing." "Yeah," I said, "it does that in October." She went back to the saddle. Neither of us said anything else, but that too got written down. 3.5 weeks had passed since the storm. We had settled into a routine so natural that I sometimes had to remind myself it had not always existed, had, in fact, existed for less than a month, which was a strange thing to sit with. She was a better rancher than I was in certain specific ways that I will admit without shame. Her eye for cattle health was sharper than mine. She could read a heifer's gait from 50 yards and tell me what was wrong before I got close enough to see it myself. She knew the land in the way that Apache people often know land, not as a thing to be managed, but as a thing to be listened to, which sounds like mysticism until you watch it in practice and realize it is simply a form of attention that most people have forgotten how to pay. She had also, over those weeks, begun to talk more. Not much more. Naya was not a talker, would never be a talker, and I had long since made peace with this, but more than before. At dinner, which we had begun eating together without ever formally deciding to, she would say things, observations, questions. Not about herself, not at first, about the ranch, the cattle, the land. One evening she asked me about my father. I told her. Theodore Cord, rancher, 3rd generation, New Mexico. A man of very few words and very great patience, who died of a heart attack at 62 while fixing the same east fence line I'd been repairing the morning she rode in, which I had not told her, and which I saw, in the telling, land in her face in a way she was trying not to show. "He left you this," she said. "He left me this," I agreed. "Do you?" She stopped, started again. "Is it enough?" I thought about the question seriously, which it deserved. "Some days, yes," I said. "Some days I'm not sure what enough would feel like." She nodded. Something shifted in her expression, not quite recognition, but adjacent to it. Like she'd asked the question half about me and half about something else, and the answer had landed in both places. I didn't ask what the other place was. I wanted to. I let the wanting sit where it was. The conversation that changed things, or began to change them, because change is never one conversation. Change is 100 small conversations, and 100 small silences all building towards something that seems sudden when it arrives, happened on a Tuesday in the middle of October, near the end of a long day. We had been moving cattle to the north pasture for the fall. It is not glamorous work. It is dusty, repetitive, occasionally infuriating work involving animals that have no interest in going where you'd like them to go, and every interest in finding new and creative ways to get themselves stuck in ravines. By afternoon, we were both tired and covered in fine red dust, and Naya had a bruise forming on her shin where a yearling had gotten in a good kick, and I had rope burns on both palms. We sat on the fence at the edge of the north pasture and watched the cattle settle and the sun started slide toward the mesa. She said without looking at me, "I used to help with cattle when I was a kid, on my uncle's land. In the northeast, around Dulce, before they sold the access rights." A pause. "He was good at it, my uncle, really patient. He would spend 3 hours getting one stubborn cow into a pen and never once lose his temper." "Patient is rare with cattle," I said. "He was patient with me too," she said, and then she stopped. I waited. "He was the only one who was," she said, "for a while anyway." I kept looking at the cattle. I didn't look at her. I had learned that she talked more easily when she wasn't being watched. My mother wasn't. She paused again, longer this time. "She was dealing with her own things most of my life. You understand. You do what you can with what you have." "You don't have to explain it to me," I said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment. I think, I'm not sure." That honesty, I think. "I'm not sure," was the most vulnerable thing she had said to me, and I felt it land like something physical. "Then take your time," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at me then, a quick sideways look, the kind you give a thing you're not sure is real. "You say that like it's easy," she said. "It's not hard to wait for something worth waiting for," I said, which was more than I usually said, and I felt slightly exposed by it, and I looked back at the cattle. She looked back at the cattle too. We sat there for another 20 minutes not saying anything, and the sun went down behind the mesa, and the sky turned the color of copper and then the color of ash. And eventually she slid down from the fence and said she was going to check on her horse. And I said good night, and she went. But when she passed behind me, I heard her stop just for a second. I didn't turn around. I heard her start walking again. I wrote that night she stopped, just for a second. I don't know what she was going to say. Maybe she didn't know either, but she stopped. She told me about him on a Saturday. Not all of it, not in one sitting, but enough. Enough for me to understand the shape of what she had been living inside for 4 years. His name doesn't matter. He was from her community, older than her, with a way of talking about her that was dressed up as concern and functioned as control. He had decided very early in their relationship what Naya Runshield was. He had communicated this to her in 1,000 small ways over 4 years, each one deniable, each one wrapped in the language of someone who just cared about her, wanted better for her, was trying to help. She told me this sitting on the steps of the bunkhouse after supper, looking at nothing in particular, picking at a loose splinter in the wood beside her. "The thing is," she said, I knew it wasn't right, but there's a gap between knowing something and being able to leave it." "Yeah," I said. I sat 2 steps below her so she wasn't talking to my face. She'd started doing that, finding positions where she was just slightly out of direct line of sight. I'd learned to let her. "The gap is full of things he'd said," she continued. "I couldn't get through it. Every time I tried to leave, I'd hear him saying," she stopped. "He told me I was difficult to love, not mean about it, just matter of fact, like it was just true, like everybody probably thought it, and he was the only one honest enough to say it." I sat with that for a moment. I sat with it because it was one of those things that deserves a moment of genuine sitting with before you respond, because a rushed response would be worse than silence. "That's not what difficult to love means," I said. She looked down at me. "What?" "Difficult to love, it's not about you. A person who says that to someone they're supposed to love is telling you something about themselves, about their patience, about what they're willing to give." I paused. "About what they think love is." She was quiet. "He thought it was easy," I said. "Love, he thought it was supposed to be easy. And when it wasn't easy, when you were a whole person with things he didn't understand, he called that a flaw in you." She said nothing for a long time. The stars were coming out over the mesa. The high desert stars that are so many and so bright out here that people from cities sometimes stop talking when they see them, just stop mid-sentence and look up. My uncle told me once, she said finally, that the people who are the hardest to reach are worth the most when you reach them. Smart man, I said. He died when I was 17. She said it plainly, without drama, the way you say a thing that you have said many times in your head and learned to say without breaking. After that, I didn't have anybody who, she stopped, breathed. I didn't have anybody who just thought I was okay, the way I was. I turned around and looked up at her. She was looking at the stars. You are okay, I said, the way you are. She looked down at me. Her face in the starlight was very still. You don't know me, she said, not combative, just careful. I know enough, I said. I know how you read wire tension with your cheek. I know you talk more about cattle than people, but you watch people more carefully than anybody I've met. I know you came out in a storm in the middle of the night to help me save feed that wasn't yours to care about. I know you're sitting here telling me things you don't tell people. I know enough. She looked at me for a long time. Then she looked back at the stars. I'm not, she stopped, her jaw worked. I'm not easy, I know that about myself, I don't know how to be easy. I don't want easy, I said. Easy is boring, easy doesn't ask anything of you. Another long silence. Elias, she said. Yeah. Don't do that thing where you're nice to me, and then you decide it was a mistake. The rawness of it hit me somewhere under the sternum. I won't, I said. You can't know that, she said. No, I said. I can't, but I can tell you I have no intention of it, and I can tell you that you talking to me is not a burden and is not something I'm going to regret. That part I can know. She picked at the splinter again. Her hands were in her lap. After a minute she said, okay. Just that, okay. But it was one of the most significant okays I have ever heard. The thing I want to be careful about, writing this down, the thing I want to get right, is the pace of it. Because in stories, things happen faster than they do in life. In stories, a woman with wounds like hers would have a revelation, a moment, a scene where the walls come down. It didn't work like that. What happened instead was smaller and slower, and in some ways more real. She laughed more. Not easily, she would never laugh easily. It would always be the short, surprised laugh that she tried to catch with her hand, and I came to love that laugh with an intensity I didn't know I was capable of. She told me more things. Small things, mostly. What she remembered about Dulce, how her uncle had taught her to shoe a horse. A funny story about a mule she'd known at the age of 11 that had eaten her entire reading homework 3 days before it was due. And in those weeks I told her things too. Things from the journal, sometimes. I would paraphrase, not read directly, but she would listen with that precise, full attention of hers. And sometimes she would nod, and sometimes she would ask a question that showed she had heard not just the words, but the thing underneath them. We were two people learning how to be known, both of us unpracticed at it. Both of us moving carefully, the way you move over new ice, testing weight before you trust it. And it was working. Slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and silences, and 2 or 3 moments when I said the wrong thing and had to find my way back, it was working. Until the day Nea's past came to find her. He arrived on a Thursday, mid-October. Drove up the main trail in a truck I didn't recognize, a white pickup with a cracked left mirror and a bumper sticker from some bar in Espanola. He was not a large man. He had a pleasant face, which I noticed immediately because it made something in me go very still in a way that large, threatening men do not. Nea was at the water trough when he pulled up. I was at the barn. I saw her face when she saw the truck, and what I saw in her face was a specific kind of afraid, not afraid the way you're afraid of something new, but afraid the way you're afraid of something familiar. She stood up straight. I watched her do it, watched the physical act of her drawing herself together, spine extending, chin level, hands still at her sides. Armor. I put down what I was holding and walked across the yard. He got out of the truck. He looked at Nea. Then he looked at me, then back at Nea. Hey, he said to her, easy casual like he'd just seen her at a store. You're hard to track down. Marcus, she said. Her voice was completely flat. I just wanted to talk, he said. That's all, just talk. I stopped about 10 feet away. I looked at Nea. She did not look at me. There's nothing to talk about, she said. Nea, he said her name the way you'd say the name of a child who's being unreasonable, patient, slightly tired, that quality of patience that is not patience at all. Come on. You should go, she said. He looked at me again, assessing. This your new thing? He said, not to me, to her, still easy, still pleasant. That pleasantness that has teeth in it. Marcus, she said, go. I drove 2 hours, he said. Can you just? She said, go. My voice was quiet. I am not a man who raises his voice. I don't need to. He looked at me properly for the first time. This doesn't involve you, he said. You're on my land, I said. Which makes it my business. She's asked you to leave. That's the conversation. He looked at me for another long moment. Then he looked at Naya. You going to let him speak for you? He said. And there it was, the thing underneath the pleasant face, the thing that had been there all along, wearing the clothes of a reasonable question and functioning as something else entirely. I watched Naya's jaw tighten. I'm going to speak for myself, she said. The same thing I said, go. He stood there for another 10 seconds. Then he got in the truck. He turned it around slowly, with the particular slowness of someone who wants you to know they're leaving on their terms and not yours, and he drove back down the main trail. We stood in the yard until the truck was out of sight, and the sound had faded. Then Naya sat down, right there in the yard in the dust, just sat down. And I sat down next to her, cross-legged in the dirt, and we sat there for a while. I'm sorry, she said. You don't need to be, I said. He followed me here. I didn't think he would. She stopped. Her hands were in her lap, very still. I thought if I just left, he'd. It's not your fault he followed you, I said. She didn't say anything. Naya, I said. You did nothing wrong. I know that, she said. I know that. She pressed her palms flat against her knees. I still feel like I did. And there it was, right there in that sentence. The whole of it laid out in the dust on an October afternoon. I know I did nothing wrong. I still feel like I did. I sat with that. I didn't try to fix it. Some things can't be fixed in an afternoon. Some things can only be witnessed. Yeah, I said. I imagine you would. She looked at me. That's it, she said. That's all. That's all, I said. You don't need me to argue you out of a feeling. The feeling makes sense. You've been told long enough that things were your fault. Her throat moved. It's going to take longer than a month to believe otherwise, I said. That's just how it works. I'm not going anywhere. She looked away, across the yard, at the mesa. Ilias, she said. Yeah. I don't know how to, she stopped, started again. I don't know how to believe that I'm another stop. I waited. That I'm worth staying for, she said, very quietly, like she was embarrassed by the size of the need. I looked at her profile, the line of her jaw, her eyes, which were bright in a way that had nothing to do with happiness. I know, I said, but you are. She pressed her lips together. November came in cold, the way it does out here when the season means it. I had been keeping the journal for 22 years at that point, and in all that time, I had never had a November feel the way that one did. I don't mean better exactly, though it was that. I mean more present, more weighted with the specific quality of being exactly where I was. Naya had been at Cordoban Flat for 2 months. Marcus had not come back. I had not expected him to. Men like that, pleasant, controlled, accustomed to their pleasantness working, tend to leave when pleasantness stops being useful. He had seen that it stopped being useful, and he had driven away and not returned. This did not mean she was free of him in the ways that mattered. The inside of a person is not a place you can defend with a fence line, and I knew that, and I tried to remember it in all the ways that counted. The ways it showed up. She would go very still sometimes when I disagreed with her, bracing for something that didn't come. She apologized for things that did not require apology, taking the last of the coffee, being 5 minutes later than she'd said, asking for a second blanket when the nights got colder. She had difficulty still with being looked at with any kind of warmth. Not all the time, but sometimes. She would catch me watching her and something would flicker across her face, something that was trying to find a reason why, something looking for the angle, the cost. I learned to make warmth unremarkable, to give it in the same tone as everything else. Not less genuine, more. Because it was genuine, and I didn't want her to have to brace for it the way she braced for everything kind. We were not, I want to be careful here, we were not in the place that people think we were. We ate dinner together. We worked together. We sat on the porch on the nights that were clear enough and looked at the stars and talked or didn't talk, and sometimes she fell asleep on the porch chair and I put a blanket over her and went to bed. and sometimes I was the one who ran out of steam first and said good night, and she'd lift 2 fingers in acknowledgement and keep watching the sky. We had not touched beyond the practical, passing tools, the night of the cut on her hand, a brief accidental collision at the gate that left us both overly formal for about an hour after. What we had was something harder to name and I think more valuable. We had knowledge of each other, real knowledge, the kind that accumulates through watching and listening and choosing not to look away. She knew me, I knew her, and knowing and being known in my experience is where everything else comes from. The conversation happened on a Sunday in the 3rd week of November. It had been a long day. We'd had a calf with a leg problem that I'd been treating for a week, and it had gotten worse overnight, and by afternoon it was clear we were losing her. Naya had been there from early morning, doing everything that could be done, which was everything and not enough. We lost the calf at 4 in the afternoon. Naya had her hands on the animal when it died, and she stayed that way for a minute after, not moving. We were both quiet at dinner. The kind of quiet after loss, even small loss, even animal loss, the kind of quiet that is about more than what it's directly about. After dinner, she didn't go to the bunkhouse. She stayed at the table, hands around a coffee cup, and I stayed too, and we sat in the lamplight in the quiet kitchen while the wind did its usual business outside. "I keep thinking about my uncle," she said. "What about him? How he would have known what to do with that calf. He always knew." She paused. "He was the kind of man who just knew things about animals, about people, about when to talk and when to just be there." "He sounds like he was something," I said. "He was the person I became myself around," she said. "After he was gone, I spent a long time not being sure who I was, and then Marcus came along and she set her coffee cup down. And he told me who I was. He was so certain about it. It was almost a relief, not to have to figure it out yourself." I nodded. I understood that. The seductive certainty of someone who will tell you who you are when you don't know. "But it wasn't true," I said. "No," she said, "it wasn't." "Who are you?" I said. She looked at me. "I mean it," I said. "Not what he said. Who are you?" She was quiet for a long time. Her finger traced the rim of the coffee cup. "I'm someone who needs to know the reason for things," she said slowly. "I ask too many questions. I always have. I get stuck on things that don't add up. It drives people. It used to drive people crazy." "It doesn't drive me crazy," I said. She looked at me. "I know," she said, like it was still slightly surprising. "I know it doesn't." "Keep going," I said. She breathed. "I'm stubborn," she said. "I hold on to things, good and bad both. I can't let go of things I'm supposed to let go of." She paused. "I'm loyal. If I decide I care about something, I care about it. I don't." She stopped. "I don't give up on people, even when I should." "That's not a flaw," I said. "He thought it was," she said. "He thought it was naive. He called it naive." "It's not naive," I said. "It's Naya. It's the thing that brought you out in a storm to help me with a tarp at 9 at night. It's the thing that kept you on that calf all morning. It's not naive. It's just care. Some people are afraid of that much care. They call it naive because the word is smaller than what it actually scares them about." She was looking at me with that look again, the one that was trying to find the catch. "Why do you do that?" she said. "Do what?" "Say things like that, like it's easy to say." "It's not easy," I said. "It's just true." "Elias," she looked down at the table. Her jaw was tight. "I've been here 2 months. You can't." She stopped, breathed. "What happens when you realize I'm too much? What happens when I ask too many questions or I don't let something go that I should or I'm too?" "Naya," I said. She looked up. "You're not broken," I said. She went very still. "I know that's what got built into you," I said. "I know that's what you've been carrying. That something is fundamentally wrong with you, and that's why love is hard, and that's why things haven't worked, and that's why you have to leave places." I kept my voice level. I wasn't going to perform emotion right now. She needed steady more than she needed moved. "That's not true. That was never true. You are not broken. You are somebody who got hurt by people who didn't know how to be careful with you, and hurt people sometimes look broken from the outside when they're just hurt." Her eyes were very bright. "And you are," I said. "Whether you can feel this right now or not, you are worthy of being cared about. Exactly as you are. The questions and the stubbornness and the loyalty and the way you put your cheek on wire to test tension. All of it." She didn't say anything. I'm not trying to fix you, I said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not interested in fixing you. There's nothing to fix. I stopped, chose the words carefully. I want to keep being someone you say things to. Whatever that is, I want to keep being that. The lamp between us was burning low. Outside, the wind was doing something complicated with the cottonwoods. Biscuit was somewhere in the corner making small sleeping sounds. Naya looked at the table for a long time. Then she looked up at me. I don't know how to do this, she said. I want to try, but I don't know how to. I keep waiting for it to go wrong. I keep waiting for you to. I know, I said. You can keep waiting. I'll still be here. Her throat worked once. Okay, she whispered. And then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Just placed it there, light, tentative, like she was testing weight on new ice. Her hand was warm from the coffee cup. Her fingers were smaller than mine, and there was that faded scar on the back of her wrist, and her nails were cut short, and her hand was shaking slightly, and she was looking at our hands like she was watching herself do something she hadn't done in a very long time and wasn't sure she was allowed to. I turned my hand over and held hers, steady, not squeezing, not tight, just steady, the way you hold something you're not going to let fall. She looked up. Her face was not what I expected. I expected relief or warmth, or some version of the ending a story like this is supposed to have. What I saw was more honest than that. What I saw was a woman who was terrified and trying anyway. What I saw was somebody in the act of choosing something, not because it was certain or safe, but because she was tired of choosing the absence of it. That was not a small thing. That was one of the largest things I had ever witnessed. You don't have to have it figured out, I said quietly. I know, she said. She was still looking at our hands. I know. We didn't mark it. There was no particular ceremony to what shifted between us that November. It was gradual and nonlinear, and there were days that were still hard, days when she pulled back into her armor, and I let her, because the armor was hers, and she was allowed to wear it. And the fact that she sometimes didn't anymore was something neither of us needed to make into an occasion. She moved into the main house in December. Into the spare room, which became hers in the way that rooms become people's, slowly, a blanket here, a book there, a pair of boots by the door. I added a hook beside the door for her coat. She added a shelf above the window for a collection of stones she'd been picking up since her first week here, each one a particular color or texture that had caught her attention on some walk or work day. I have no idea what system governed the collection. I didn't ask. It is, as best I can tell, entirely instinctive, and it has grown to include 47 stones that I have counted, covering 3/4 of the shelf and threatening to expand. We learned the particular choreography of two people sharing a space. The small negotiations, who uses the kitchen first, how loud is too loud in the morning, who closes the gate when. She learned that I am useless before the second coffee but functional after it. I learned that she needs 20 minutes of quiet after any long social interaction, even good ones, even with me, and that this was not about me and required no adjustment on her part. These were not dramatic things, but the non-dramatic things are the architecture of it, the actual structure of a life shared, which is not built of grand gestures, but of the accumulated weight of 10,000 small courtesies. January. It had been snowing for 3 days when she came and found me at the desk where I write the journal. I had the lamp on, and the stove going, and the wind outside was doing its low howl that in this house sounds almost comfortable, because you are in, and it is out. She had been to check on Gospel, and came back with snow in her hair and cold on her face, and she stood in the doorway of the study looking at me for a moment. "What are you writing?" she said. "Everything," I said. She came and stood beside the desk and looked down at the open journal. I didn't close it. She read, I don't know what she read. A paragraph, maybe, 2. Her face changed while she read, the way faces change when they encounter something true. She put her hand on my shoulder, just rested it there. "Can I read it sometime?" she said. "All of it from the beginning." "Yes," I said, "whenever you want." She took her hand off my shoulder and went to get warm by the stove, and I looked at the journal page and then at her back, at the snow still in her hair, and the way the firelight moved on it. I wrote she asked to read it. I said yes. I have never said yes to that before. I said yes because she is the first person I have ever wanted to understand the whole of what I've been thinking. I sat for a while, then I wrote. The stones on the shelf in her room. The way she laughs and tries to stop it. The fact that she still sometimes apologizes for taking the last of the coffee, and I am still trying to find the right way to tell her she never has to, that the coffee is hers as much as mine. The way she said, "I don't know how to do this," and reached across the table anyway. That's what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, not certainty, just reaching across anyway. She doesn't believe yet fully that she deserves this. She is getting there. Some days she is much further along than others, and on the others I just stay steady and keep the lamp lit and don't require anything from her that she doesn't have today. I have no idea where this goes. The ranch is the same. The cattle are the same. The mesa is the same. And everything is different. She is worth staying for. I know that as well as I know anything. I hope, I am trying to trust, that eventually she will know it too. The last thing I wrote that January was this, and I want to put it here because it is the truest sentence I have written in 22 years of keeping this journal. She is not broken. She was never broken. She was waiting without knowing she was waiting for someone to be patient enough to know her. I hope I am that person. I think I might be. We'll find out. Outside, the snow was still coming down. Inside, the stove clicked and settled. The lamp burned on. Somewhere in the house, Naya was reading something. I could hear the occasional page turn. And Biscuit had finally, after months of strategic indecision, chosen both of us and was asleep in the doorway between the study and the main room, exactly equidistant, as if he had surveyed the situation and determined that the only fair solution was the middle. I looked at him for a long time. Then I looked back at the journal. Then I closed it. Some things you write down because you need to understand them. And some things you write down because you want to remember that you were there in that room on that night, when the snow was falling and the lamp was burning, and the distance between two people had become, without ceremony or announcement, the particular small distance of people who have chosen each other.